Hello everyone, I'm Captain Logan, and welcome once again to the vast and ominous comic book vault. Let's add some new acquisitions, shall we? I've got 4 new books, mainstream stuff, but first I want to start off with an indie comic that was sent to me last week by Gary Bratner in the mail. This is called Peter Pan the Vampire, and this was, like I said, this came in the mail last week, and Gary meant to send me the first 2 issues, but for some reason the second issue didn't make it into the package, so I'm just going to talk about the first one, and then I'll talk about the second one sometime later on when I get it. So this is an indie book. This is an underground thing published by Gary himself, and what it does is it takes Peter Pan and it turns him into a vampire. It's just what it sounds like. The idea is kind of mixing vampire mythos with the traditional story of Peter Pan. So Peter Pan happens the way we remember it pretty much, except that Peter Pan is a vampire, and a lot of the kind of magical, mystical things built into the Peter Pan story are we find out are actually superpowers. So we find out that, and I think probably the coolest idea in the book is that Peter Pan actually has a superpower that has to do with shadows, because the whole beginning of Peter Pan was always about him trying to sew his own shadow onto himself because he kept losing it. And he says in this that was because it was a superpower that he hadn't figured out how to control yet. And I think that's kind of interesting. And so he not only can he fly if he has fairy dust, but he also has the ability to teleport through shadows, and he can go anywhere in the world through a shadow, and I think that's kind of interesting. And basically the idea is because he's a vampire, and apparently it looks like kind of always has been a vampire, or maybe at some point he was turned into one, but we're not given that backstory yet. We're pretty much just given the Peter Pan Neverland backstory in him meeting Wendy and chasing his shadow and killing Captain Hook, who in this was a vampire slayer. And by this point, Peter Pan has met 2 different vampire slayers. One of them is Hook, who he fed, of course, to a crocodile, and the second one is this girl that he meets at the beginning of this, Gwen, whose husband was killed by Peter Pan the Vampire, and she finally tracks him down after a long time and tries to kill him. And he claims that he only kills humans, because of course he has to feed on them to survive, that he only kills humans that are bad, evil people, and that he can sense innocent people, and so he stays away from them, and since he has to feed on people, he just goes after bad guys, and that's the best he can do, basically, is what he says. And Gwen doesn't realize that her husband was this terrible person who, I guess, was a drug dealer and some other bad things. And so, ultimately, she and Peter Pan, even though she tries to kill him, and he's bleeding everywhere because she stabs him with a sword, they end up becoming friends. So it's kind of funny. There's a part where he and she are sitting at a diner, and he's got all this blood everywhere, and they're just kind of like enjoying dinner at a diner while he's kind of bleeding everywhere, and I thought that was kind of funny. The story, I think, is a little bit rushed. There's a lot of really good ideas. I think that it's a little odd that Gwen and Peter Pan become friends as fast as they do. After all, she's been looking for him forever, wanting to kill him for killing her husband, and she kind of just takes his word for the fact that her husband was this terrible person, doesn't really look into it or anything, and I found that a little bit far-fetched. I think maybe it could have gone, there could have been some more time to develop the idea of them becoming friends instead of it all happening so quickly in one issue. The art is not ultra professional, mostly because of the way that it's colored, and I don't know if that's on purpose or not. I would imagine it probably is. The art is decent. I would say that it probably would look more professional if it was just colored digitally, but he colors it by hand, and so it looks really underground. I mean, that's not necessarily a problem, but it does. It looks really underground, and maybe that's what he was going for. He also has his daughter do a lot of the art in the middle for all the flashback sections with Peter Pan and Neverland, which I think is a really cool idea. I kind of enjoyed that, where it's this really little kid kind of art, giving the background fairy tales, but with this kind of somewhat violent twist, and I don't know, that was kind of fun to see drawn by a little kid. Not that it was, I don't want it to sound bad, not that it was too violent for a little kid to draw it or anything like that. I don't mean that, but anyway, yeah, this is really interesting. I think that it could certainly be more polished, and this happens sometimes with independent comic creators that are working by themselves, get really excited about making their own work, and don't really have anybody, kind of looking over them and making sure that, things are professional and that there's not any typos and things like that. There are a few kind of glaring typos that I noticed in this and things like that. Nothing major. It could easily be cleared up, but anyway, that's Peter Pan the Vampire, a really interesting underground comic, and I'm interested to see where this goes when I get the second issue. The next thing I'd like to talk about is Ghostbusters number 12. This, of course, Eric Burnham, the ever-talented and hilarious Eric Burnham, finishing up his 4-issue story arc about the Ghostbusters going across country and dealing with ghosts in different places. This time they're going to Seattle, Washington, and it's this. I think this is by far the coolest idea out of the 4, just for my money. And by the way, I like that all 4 of these were, even though they blended into each other and they informed the next story, they were all kind of standalone stories, and that was a lot of fun to read. But I really like this one, I think even more than the other 3, because it's about this musician, Ghost, who always had this song stuck in his head that he wanted to get out, and he wasn't the most talented musician, he and his band, but they got like suddenly really talented because he got with this witch girl who really built up their talent. And then what happened is he finally, one night, the song that he's always been wanting to get out, that he could never get right, comes to him, and he's playing it at night. He's playing it at a show, and suddenly he catches on fire. It's spontaneous human combustion. And all he wants to do is finish the song, and he says, "Let me finish, let me finish." And then he dies, and then he becomes a ghost, and he's haunting the place. And I think that it's a great story. And every time this ghost shows up, he's on fire, and he's got this guitar, and the only thing that is really totally clear and visible is his guitar, which goes into how the Ghostbusters end up finally stopping him, and he keeps showing up and causing all these problems, of course. And I think probably the funniest bit in this one is when Peter is trying to figure out how to get him to become a little bit more clear in the face. What happens is when the ghosts are too out of phase, they can't use their proton packs and do anything to them. And so in order to get them to look more clear, you try to bring out more of their personality of who they were when they were alive. And so he yells up to him, "Play Freebird!" And suddenly you can see his face, and the guy's really irritated. It's a really good ghost story, and as always, this book continues to be fantastic. The art is still as good as it's ever been, and I'm really glad Churning's still on it. Solid book. If you're not reading Ghostbusters, this is a great time to jump on, because that story arc just ended, and now we're going back to New York and a new thing starting. So if you haven't been reading Ghostbusters, well, what's wrong with you? You should. It's a great book. The next thing I want to talk about is the Detective Comics Annual. Now, I haven't been reading Detective Comics much, and I didn't really care for the first story arc from New 52, so I kind of jumped off of it. And this week I had... This was kind of a thin week for comics for my pull list, and I didn't have a whole lot of extra stuff to review, so I thought I'd buy something extra. So I got the Detective Annual, and I really like what DC is doing with these annuals. They're all, or at least this one is, and I thumbed through some other ones. I think that a lot of them are this way, where they have to do with other things that have happened in the book leading up to this, but they're a good thick standalone story that you can read on its own. And this one is definitely that way. This one is about Black Mask, and Black Mask is trying to get his false face gang back together. He had all these people that wore these different masks, and he could control them with the black mask. And the idea is that apparently all of these other different animal masks are built with part of the material that the black mask is made out of built into them. And this version of Black Mask it's a really interesting version. This version of Black Mask is able to control people with his mask, because there's something about the mask that makes him able to mind control people, and then they forget everything they did while they were mind controlled. And apparently he kind of did that with his gang, and he's trying to get them all back together. And he was supposedly in Arkham for a little while, and then he escaped, and he was able to make Jeremiah Arkham think that he was still there the entire time. And it's a pretty good, solid book, and part of it is Black Mask versus the Mad Hatter, because of course the Mad Hatter has famously in the past done the same sort of thing where he mind controls people, and so they have kind of a bit of a power struggle. And there's some really great artwork in this. This is written by Tony Daniel. Tony Daniel has sometimes been hit or miss with me with Batman, but I think he's pretty solid here. This isn't brilliant Batman storytelling, but it's quite good. And art by somebody I don't know, Romano Molinar. That's a new name to me, but I really like this art, and I really enjoyed this book. I don't know if it's enough to get me to jump back on a detective or not, but as a good standalone story, and boy, I love me some good standalone stories in an issue, this is quite solid. And the next thing is Superman Family Adventures number 4. I was a big Tiny Titans fan, and my wife and I read Tiny Titans. We thought it was always really, really funny, and for those of you that haven't heard me talk about this before, yes, it's a children's book. Yes, it's a little kid thing. There's also always a lot of really fun inside jokes for DC fans and people who know comics in general. And so it was always worth reading for kids and adults alike. Superman Family Adventures is somewhat the same way. It's of course in the same kind of style. The artwork is very, very similar, and the way that they do the lettering and everything is the same. What's different, of course, is that it's more cohesive as a narrative. It's still really silly and really funny, but there's a really loose ongoing story going on where you can read these separately. They're all very much standalones, but I mean, you've got Lex Luthor in the background doing different things, and they do reference things that happen in earlier issues. And so it's not as much like Tiny Titans in that Tiny Titans, the storytelling was more like a comic strip where you'd get kind of a story of an ongoing story in an issue, but it wasn't really a beginning, a middle, and an end. And this is much more like a Saturday morning cartoon kind of episode. This one is about Titano, and there's this hilarious, absurd thing that Balthazar does in this, where Clark Kent is walking around with his pet monkey, who is of course which is of course the super monkey. It's Beppo, and but he wears glasses so that he can disguise himself, so that nobody knows that he's actually the super monkey with the cape and everything. And I think that's just hilarious. Also funny is that Titano is called Titano before he becomes a giant monkey. So he's like this little monkey that that somebody has at the Daily Planet, and actually who had this? Oh yeah, Lois for some reason. Oh yeah, okay, so he's visiting from Haley's Circus to do a cover photo shoot for the Daily Planet. That's hilarious. I like that he's from Haley's Circus. That's great. And there's always these little fun inside DC jokes in these. And but yeah, he's called Titano before he's Gargantua, before it makes sense for him to be called Titano. And then what happens is a piece of red meteorite falls from space for some reason and turns Titano into the big Titano, and Superman has to stop him. I also like that Bizarro is just Superboy's pet in this, and he lives at the Fortress of Solitude, and Superboy has to take him for walks. Anyway, this is a really fun book, as always, and continues to be great. And, I was really kind of sad when they canceled Tiny Titans, and I'm not anymore after reading a few issues of this, because this is the same kind of fun, but a little bit more cohesive, and I really like that about it. So yeah, that one's great. The last thing I want to talk about today is Star Trek Doctor Who number 4. This continues to get more and more fun. I do think that, this being an 8-issue miniseries, I do think that the storytelling is a little bit stretched, and I was really in love with the idea of this being a whole 8 issues, and I still am, and I'm still glad that it's getting that much time to really tell a good story. But at the same time, there's a lot of people sitting around talking in this, and it makes it feel like a next-gen episode, which is great. But what I'm missing so far is I'm not seeing a whole lot of really fun Doctor stuff. The Doctor so far has been doing a lot of exposition and a lot of just wondering what the heck he's doing there, and in the Star Trek universe, and trying to figure out what's going on, because he has this like cosmic awareness where he realizes suddenly that he remembers things that he's not supposed to remember, and he figures out finally in this that what's happened is these two universes have blended, and it's as if they've always been blended. And in issue 3, which I didn't get to review, there's this great bit in 3 I really liked, by the way, how the artwork suddenly changes in that when he goes to the original series and has an adventure with the old-looking Cybermen in the original series with Captain Kirk, and he remembers that, and he's like, I shouldn't remember that. That shouldn't have happened. And so far, there's not a whole lot. There's a few, but I'm kind of surprised by just the lack so far of really fun, jokey Doctor moments, like I would kind of expect from a Doctor Who story. Maybe more of that's coming, but so far it's felt much more like a next-gen story, which I know, me being a giant Star Trek fan, it's weird for me to complain about that, but I'm waiting for more of a blend. Having said that, this is the best issue so far. I really like that the Tiptons decided to bring Guinan into this. That makes so much sense, and is just a genius thing to do, to have Guinan and the Doctor sit down and talk to each other, because they're, of course, the only two people with this kind of cosmic awareness, and Guinan is feeling the same thing, and I love that he didn't even feel the need to come out and spell this out. If you know TNG, you know where this came from. That Guinan has figured out that something is wrong with the universe for the same reason that she knew it in Yesterday's Enterprise, when she saw Tasha Yar and said, well, you're supposed to be dead. You shouldn't be here, and I remember you being here, but I shouldn't remember that. And the whole idea of these two universes being blended together seems to come straight from Yesterday's Enterprise, so I think that that's really great. And this issue is mostly about how the Cybermen and the Borg were together, and they were this big force, and we don't know why yet, but all of a sudden they've turned against each other, and the Cybermen seem to be winning. And there's this big there's this big discussion now between the Doctor and Captain Picard about how they should handle that and who they should side with, if anybody. And I'll just leave it at that. The ending cliffhanger is great. This book has been fantastic for cliffhangers. This is also the best art so far in the whole thing. And I complained about not having enough fun Doctor moments, but the Doctor on the transporter pad is pretty awesome. So anyway, that's what I've got to say about new comics this week. Thanks a lot for watching the Comic Book Vault. If there's anything you ever want to see me review on the Vault that I might not have on hand, you can always personal message me first, and then you can send me stuff at our P.O. Box. That's Geekvolution, P.O. Box 14183, Lenexa, Kansas 66285. I'm Captain Logan, and happy reading.